The crisis of our age is not economic, though we face economic challenges. It is not military, though we must remain vigilant. The crisis of our age is moral. It is a crisis of honesty. We have created a political culture that punishes candor and rewards deception. We elect leaders who promise us everything and ask us for nothing. We applaud those who tell us we are right and dismiss those who tell us we are wrong. And in doing so, we have forgotten a fundamental truth, that self-government is not about finding leaders who will make us comfortable. It is about becoming citizens who can handle uncomfortable truths. The restoration of honest leadership begins not with them, but with us. Let me explain what I mean by this and why it matters more than almost anything else we could discuss today. You will understand why honest leadership has become so rare in our democracy and what this scarcity costs us. You will discover why the very structure of modern politics rewards deception and punishes candor. But more importantly, you will learn how to recognize authentic leadership when you encounter it, and how to create the conditions in which honest leaders can emerge and thrive. Many of you feel betrayed by leaders who promised one thing and delivered another. You sense that something fundamental has broken in our political life, that we live in an age of performance rather than principle, where image has replaced integrity. You watch debates and speeches and wonder, is anyone telling the truth? Does anyone believe what they are saying? And perhaps most troubling, have we created a system where only those willing to deceive can succeed? Right now, you see leadership as something distant and corrupted, a game played by others, by people willing to compromise their principles for power. But what if leadership were something else entirely? What if it were not about charisma or clever rhetoric, but about the simple courage to tell the truth, even when that truth is difficult? What if the leaders we need are not superhuman, but simply honest? And what if the barrier between where we are and where we wish to be is not their corruption, but our own unwillingness to support them when they speak plainly? We have been taught that politics requires deception, that successful leaders must tell people what they want to hear. This is false. History shows us that the most consequential leaders were those who refused to flatter, who demanded more from their citizens than comfort and ease. The misconception is not that honest leadership is difficult. It is. The misconception is that it is impossible, that our system cannot reward truth. But systems are made by men, and what has been made can be remade. I speak not as someone removed from the demands of leadership, but as someone who has lived them. I know what it costs to take the unpopular position. I understand the pressure to soften truth, to compromise principle for political survival. But I also know this, that the leaders who matter, the leaders who build, rather than merely manage, are those who believe that citizens can handle the truth, who respect the people enough to trust them with reality. This is an exploration of what we must become, both as leaders and as citizens, if we are to preserve self-government itself. Let me take you back to a moment when a nation faced this very choice between comfort and truth. In the 1930s, Britain faced a rising threat from Germany. The evidence was clear. Hitler was rearming, preparing for war. Intelligence reports showed German factories producing tanks and aircraft. Diplomats sent warnings. Military experts raised alarms. The threat was not hidden. It was simply inconvenient. The British people, exhausted from the Great War, wanted peace. They wanted to believe that reasonable diplomacy could prevent another catastrophe. They had lost an entire generation of young men in the trenches. The very thought of another war was unbearable. And so they chose leaders who would tell them what they wished to hear. Their leaders, many of them good men, gave them what they wanted. Stanley Baldwin, the Prime Minister, knew about German rearmament. He received the intelligence reports. He understood the danger, but he also understood something else. that telling the British people the truth would cost him politically. Years later, after the war had come and gone, Baldwin stood in Parliament and made an extraordinary admission. He said, and these are his words, "Suppose I had gone to the country and said that Germany was rearming and that we must rearm. I cannot think of anything that would have made the loss of the election more certain." Think about that admission. A leader facing mortal danger to his nation chose electoral victory over truth, not because he was evil. Baldwin was, by all accounts, a decent man. He cared about his country. He wanted to do right. But when the moment came to choose between his political survival and his nation's security, he chose himself. And the system rewarded him for it. He won his election. He remained prime minister. The British people, told what they wished to hear, felt safe and comfortable for a while. But history does not care about elections. History cares about truth. And the truth was that Germany was preparing for war. When that war finally came, Britain stood defenseless. Young pilots flew obsolete aircraft against the German Luftwaffe. Soldiers went to battle with insufficient equipment. The nation survived, but only through extraordinary sacrifice and the fortune of geography. I studied this period carefully in my years at Harvard. I wrote my senior thesis on why England slept, why a great democracy failed to prepare for a threat it could clearly see. What struck me was not that Baldwin was uniquely corrupt. It was that he was perfectly ordinary. He did what our systems encourage leaders to do. He told people what they wished to hear. He made them comfortable. He won his election. The failure was not his alone. It belonged to an entire democracy that preferred pleasant lies to hard truths. It belonged to voters who punished politicians for speaking plainly about danger. It belonged to a culture that had decided comfort mattered more than reality. And here is what troubles me most. I see the same patterns in our own democracy today. Leaders who promise easy solutions to complex problems, politicians who tell us we can have security without sacrifice, prosperity without price, a public that rewards those who flatter and punishes those who challenge. But I have also witnessed another kind of leadership. In researching men and women who chose principle over popularity, I found a pattern. These were not fearless people. They were frightened. They knew what it would cost them to tell the truth. They knew they might lose elections, friendships, influence, even their careers. But they chose truth anyway. I want to tell you about a man named Edmund Ross. He was a senator from Kansas in 1868. You may not have heard of him. History has largely forgotten him. But what he did in one moment of crisis reveals everything about courage and leadership. President Andrew Johnson was facing impeachment. The nation was still raw from the Civil War. Passions ran high, and the votes in the Senate were extremely close. Edmund Ross held the deciding vote. His constituents had demanded he vote for impeachment. They sent him letters, telegrams, threats. They made it absolutely clear what they expected. If he voted his conscience, if he went against their wishes, his political career would end. Not might end, would end. Everyone knew it. Ross studied the case. He examined the evidence. He concluded that while Johnson was not a good president, the charges did not justify removal. More than that, he believed that removing a president for political reasons would set a dangerous precedent. It would weaken the presidency itself, would turn impeachment into a political weapon rather than a constitutional safeguard. The day of the vote arrived. The Senate chamber was packed. The tension was unbearable. When they called his name, Edmund Ross stood. The room went silent. Everyone knew what this meant for him. And he said, simply, not guilty. His political career ended that day. He was denounced in newspapers across Kansas. His former friends refused to speak to him. He received death threats. He could not find work. He died in obscurity and poverty. For decades, he was remembered as a traitor, if he was remembered at all. But here is what Ross understood, what made him a leader rather than simply a politician. Some things matter more than your own survival. Some principles are worth the price. He believed that his duty was not to his career, not even to his constituents in the narrow sense, but to the Constitution and to the nation's future. History eventually vindicated him. Scholars now recognize that Ross was right, that his vote preserved the balance of powers that makes our republic work. But he did not live to see that vindication. He made his choice knowing he would pay the full price with no reward in sight. What I learned from studying men like Ross is this: courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision that something matters more than your own survival. These leaders understood that their duty was not to their careers, but to something larger than themselves. Let me tell you about a moment when I faced this choice myself. It was during my time in Congress debating immigration reform. This was personal for me. My great-grandfather left Ireland with nothing but faith and determination. He came to America seeking a better life, and America gave him that chance. But in my district, the easy position, the popular position, would have been to support restrictions. Many of my constituents feared that immigrants would take their jobs, would change their communities. These were real fears. I did not dismiss them, but I had studied our history. I knew that every generation of Americans had feared the newcomers. The English feared the Irish. The Irish feared the Italians. Everyone feared someone, and I knew something else. The strength of America lay not in closing our doors, but in our capacity to absorb and elevate those who came seeking freedom. Every wave of immigration had made us stronger, more dynamic, more innovative. Yes, it caused disruption. Yes, it required adjustment. But the alternative, shutting ourselves off from the world's energy and talent, would make us weaker, not stronger. So I chose the harder path. I argued for reform that would treat people not by their nation of origin, but by their merit and their need. I spoke about my own family's journey. I made the case that our values, our belief in opportunity and human dignity, required us to welcome those who shared those beliefs, regardless of where they were born. I knew it would cost me support. I knew some would call me naive, or worse. I received angry letters. Some donors withdrew their support. In my next election, my opponent used my position against me, claimed I cared more about foreigners than about American workers. But I believed then, and I believe now, that leaders must sometimes ask citizens to be better than their fears, that our job is not to confirm people's prejudices, but to call forth their better nature. I won that election, but not by much. And I understood that I had been given a chance to lead only because enough people were willing to hear a difficult truth. The question is not whether this cost me politically. It did. The question is whether I could look at myself and know that I had told the truth as I understood it. That is the only standard that matters. These stories reveal something essential about leadership and about ourselves. Let me share what they teach us. The test of leadership is, at its core, simple. Does this person tell the truth, even when the truth is difficult? Not the partial truth, not the convenient truth, but the full truth as they understand it. This test is not about perfection. Leaders can be wrong. They can misjudge situations. They can make mistakes. But there is a difference between being mistaken and being dishonest. A leader who genuinely believes something and speaks it, even if later proven wrong, has maintained integrity. They were honest about what they believed to be true. A leader who knows one thing and says another has betrayed the fundamental trust upon which democracy depends. Why has this test become so difficult to pass? because we have built systems that punish honesty. A politician who speaks plainly about sacrifice will lose to one who promises easy solutions. A leader who admits uncertainty will be labeled weak. A candidate who refuses to make impossible promises will be dismissed as uninspiring. We see this play out in every election. One candidate says, "This problem is complex, there are no easy answers, it will require sacrifice from all of us." Another candidate says, "I have a simple solution. It will cost you nothing. Vote for me, and all your problems will disappear." Who wins? Usually the one who lies. Not because voters are stupid, they are not, but because we are all human. We all want to believe that our problems have easy solutions. We all want to avoid sacrifice. And when someone tells us what we want to hear, it feels true, even when we know it probably is not. This is why we cannot change this by demanding better leaders alone. We must become better citizens, citizens capable of hearing difficult truths without seeking comfort elsewhere, citizens who understand that governing is hard, that most problems do not have simple solutions, that sometimes the right answer is the one that costs us something. The restoration of honest leadership requires not just courageous leaders, but mature citizens. Self-government rests on a simple premise, that citizens can be trusted with the truth. If they cannot, if they must be managed, manipulated, told only what they can handle, then democracy becomes impossible. It becomes a kind of benevolent tyranny where elites decide what information the people can bear. This is what makes dishonest leadership so corrosive. It is not merely a personal failing of individual politicians. It is an assault on the very possibility of self-government. When leaders lie to the people, they declare you cannot be trusted with reality. You must be protected from your own democracy. Think about what this means. Every time a leader chooses to deceive rather than inform, they are saying that you are not capable of handling truth, that you must be treated like a child who needs to be shielded from difficult facts. This is an insult to your intelligence and to your dignity as a citizen. And here is the terrible irony. When we reward leaders who flatter us, when we punish those who challenge us, we prove them right. We demonstrate that we cannot handle truth. We choose comfort over freedom. We accept the role of children being managed by others. The question before us is not whether leadership has failed. It has. The question is whether we, as citizens, will accept our share of responsibility for that failure. Have we created the conditions where only dishonest leaders can succeed? Have we made it impossible for truthful men and women to thrive in public life? I believe we have. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but through 1,000 small choices, we have built a system that rewards deception. We change the channel when someone tells us something we do not want to hear. We vote for the candidate who promises us the most while asking the least. We share articles that confirm what we already believe and dismiss those that challenge us. Each of these choices seems small, insignificant, but they add up. They create a culture where honesty is punished and deception is rewarded. And then we wonder why our leaders lie to us. What do we lose when leaders lie to us? The immediate answer is obvious. We lose the ability to make informed decisions. If our leaders tell us that threats do not exist, we cannot prepare for them. If they promise prosperity without sacrifice, we cannot plan accordingly. Bad information leads to bad decisions. This is simple logic. But the deeper cost is moral. Each time a leader lies and is rewarded for it, we all become a little more cynical. We begin to assume that all politics is dishonest, that everyone is corrupt, that no one truly means what they say. This cynicism eats away at civic life. It makes genuine leadership nearly impossible because citizens have lost the ability to recognize it. I have seen this cynicism spread through our political culture. Young people, idealistic and energetic, enter public service with high hopes. They want to make a difference. They believe in the possibility of good government. Then they encounter a system that seems designed to crush idealism, that rewards manipulation over principle, that treats truth as a liability rather than an asset. Many become cynical themselves. They learn to say what people want to hear. They master the art of the non-answer, the carefully crafted statement that sounds meaningful but commits to nothing. They tell themselves this is necessary, that you cannot accomplish anything if you do not win, that compromise is part of the job. Others withdraw entirely. They conclude that politics is irredeemably corrupt, that decent people cannot survive in such an environment. They take their talents elsewhere, into business or academia or private life, and the political system loses the very people it needs most. This is the true cost of dishonest leadership. It destroys our capacity for hope. And without hope, without the belief that politics can be a noble calling, that leadership can be honorable, democracy cannot survive. It becomes nothing more than a contest between rival gangs, each seeking power for its own sake, none serving any larger purpose. Let us be honest about the challenges facing leaders who choose truth over popularity. In the short term, they often fail. They lose elections. They are marginalized by their parties. They watch as less principled competitors succeed where they falter. This is not because voters are stupid or irrational. It is because democracy, at its best, is slow. It requires time for truth to be recognized, for the consequences of deception to become clear. Dishonest leaders can succeed in the short term precisely because their lies provide immediate comfort. They promise easy solutions. They tell people what they want to hear. They win elections. But consider the leaders who endure in our memory, the ones we teach our children about, the ones whose examples inspire us. They are not the popular ones, the comfortable ones. They are the ones who told hard truths, who demanded sacrifice, who believed we were capable of more than comfort and ease. Abraham Lincoln did not promise the Civil War would be short or painless. He told Americans the truth, that preserving the Union would require terrible sacrifice, that the war would be long and bloody, that many would die. He gave no false comfort, and Americans, when presented with honesty, rose to meet that challenge. Franklin Roosevelt did not pretend the Depression would fix itself. He told the American people that we faced a crisis unlike any in our history, that it would require new approaches, new sacrifices, new commitments. He said we had nothing to fear but fear itself, but he did not pretend we had nothing to fear at all. He respected the people enough to tell them the truth. This is what gives me hope, that when leaders truly trust the people with truth, citizens often respond with courage and commitment. The failure is not in the capacity of the American people to handle reality. The failure is in leaders who have lost faith in that capacity. We have become so accustomed to being lied to that we assume the people cannot handle truth. But this is backwards. The people can handle truth. What they cannot handle is discovering, after it is too late, that they have been deceived. How do we restore honest leadership? Not by waiting for exceptional individuals to save us. We do it by changing what we reward. If we want honest leaders, we must support them when they speak difficult truths, even when those truths make us uncomfortable, especially when those truths make us uncomfortable. We must learn to recognize the difference between a leader who flatters and one who challenges, between promises that sound good and policies that will work. This requires something from us, intellectual humility. We must admit that we do not have all the answers, that governing is complex, that reasonable people can disagree. We must stop demanding that our leaders confirm what we already believe and start asking them to help us see what we have missed. I have watched too many good people destroyed because they admitted uncertainty. In our culture, admitting you do not know something is seen as weakness, but it is actually strength. It is honesty. The leader who admits ignorance can learn. The leader who pretends to know everything remains ignorant. We must extend grace to those who are willing to change their minds. A leader who admits error, who adjusts course based on new information, is not weak. They are honest. They are learning. They are growing. We should celebrate this kind of integrity, not punish it. Think about your own life. When have you learned the most? When you were certain you were right, or when you realized you were wrong? Growth comes from admitting error, from being willing to change. We should want leaders who can do this. The restoration of honest leadership is not a political project. It is a moral project. It requires us to become the kinds of citizens who can sustain honest leaders, who value truth more than comfort, who understand that self-government is work, not entertainment. These principles are clear enough in theory. But how do we practice them? What can each of us do today to create the conditions for honest leadership to thrive? Begin with yourself. Before you can demand honesty from leaders, you must practice it in your own life. This means being willing to question your own beliefs, to seek information that challenges your assumptions, to admit when you are wrong. Let me give you a practical step. Each day, read one piece that disagrees with your worldview, not to dismiss it, not to find flaws in it, but to understand it. Force yourself to engage with ideas that make you uncomfortable. This builds the intellectual muscle necessary to handle truth when leaders speak it. When you hear a politician make a promise that sounds too good to be true, ask, how will this be accomplished? What will it cost? Who will pay that cost? Do not accept pleasant generalities. Demand specifics. If they cannot provide them, that tells you something. This discipline of truth-seeking is not easy. It is much simpler to stay in our comfortable bubbles, reading only what confirms what we already believe. But this laziness, this intellectual comfort, is what enables dishonest leadership. Leaders lie because we do not demand truth. They make impossible promises because we do not ask how those promises will be kept. The next time a leader you support admits they were wrong or takes an unpopular position based on principle, defend them, not blindly. Examine their reasoning. Challenge it if necessary. But if you find it sound, stand with them, even if it costs you socially or politically. Write to leaders who demonstrate courage. Tell them you appreciate their honesty. This may seem small, but politicians pay attention to their mail, to public response. They notice when honesty is rewarded. When a leader takes a risk and receives support rather than condemnation, it encourages more of the same. Conversely, when leaders lie or manipulate, call it out, not with outrage alone, but with disappointment. Express that you expected better, that you believe they are capable of more. Hold them to a higher standard, not because you wish to destroy them, but because you wish to elevate them. Read deeply about the challenges facing our nation. Not just headlines, but books. Not just opinion, but analysis. Understand that most political questions do not have simple answers. That governing requires trade-offs and compromise. When you understand complexity, you become less vulnerable to leaders who promise easy solutions. You can recognize when someone is being honest about difficulties rather than simply pessimistic. You can tell the difference between a leader who admits uncertainty and one who is merely indecisive. Make a commitment. Read one serious book each month about a political or historical topic, not to become an expert. You do not need to be an expert, but to develop the habit of deep engagement with ideas. Share what you learn with others. Create conversations that go beyond talking points in your own life, at work, in your family, in your community. Model the kind of honesty you wish to see in leaders. When someone admits they do not know something, respect that admission. When someone changes their mind based on evidence, celebrate their intellectual courage. We have created a culture of performance where people fear saying, I do not know or I was wrong. This filters up into our politics. where leaders believe they must always appear certain, always in control. If we want different leadership, we must create different expectations in our daily lives. Start a conversation group in your community, a place where people can discuss difficult questions without fear of judgment, where changing your mind is seen as growth rather than weakness. These small spaces of honesty create the cultural foundation for honest leadership at larger scales. This work is not glamorous, it does not produce immediate results, but it is essential. We cannot have honest leaders without honest citizens. We cannot demand courage from them if we do not demonstrate it ourselves. We have spoken today about leadership, but truly, we have spoken about ourselves. For in a democracy, the quality of our leaders reflects the quality of our citizenship. If we have dishonest leaders, it is because we have rewarded dishonesty. If we lack courage in our politics, it is because we have not demanded it of them or of ourselves. The crisis of our age is not that we lack good people willing to serve. It is that we have made service nearly impossible for those who wish to remain honest. We have created systems that reward deception and punish candor, and then we express shock when our leaders lie to us. But here is what I know from my years in public service. This can change. Not easily, not quickly, but certainly it can change when citizens decide to value truth more than comfort. When we become willing to hear difficult things from those we elect. When we extend our support not to those who flatter us, but to those who challenge us to be better than we are. The world needs honest leaders again. This much is true. But more than that, the world needs citizens capable of sustaining them. It needs people who understand that self-government is not about finding leaders who will make us comfortable, but about becoming citizens who can handle uncomfortable truths. This is my challenge to you. Do not wait for perfect leaders to appear. Become the kind of citizen who makes honest leadership possible. Seek truth, even when it disturbs you. Support candor, even when it costs you. Demand more from yourself, so that you can rightly demand more from those who seek to lead. The American experiment has always depended on the character of its citizens. That has not changed. What remains to be seen is whether we still possess that character, whether we still believe that truth matters more than comfort, that freedom requires sacrifice, that democracy demands our active participation in its survival. I believe we do. I believe you do. And I believe that if we commit ourselves to these principles, not perfectly, but honestly, we can restore what has been lost and build something worthy of the generations who come after us. The choice is before you, not in some future election, but now, today, in how you conduct yourself, what you demand from your leaders, and what you are willing to sacrifice for truth. Choose well. Our democracy depends on it. If these ideas resonate with you, if you believe that honest leadership is not merely desirable but essential, then I ask you to do 3 things. Subscribe to this channel for more reflections on leadership, citizenship, and the principles that sustain free societies. Like this video if you believe these truths must be spoken, even when they are uncomfortable, and most importantly, comment below with your own commitment. What will you do, beginning today, to create the conditions for honest leadership in your community? Your democracy needs more than your approval. It needs your active participation. Let us begin.